So I went on a mission, and from illiterate tribal women, I learned the same lessons you could learn going to Rome. Because although they were illiterate in terms of language, through the adornment of the body and the practice of rituals, they acquired the same knowledge as Palladio had, in almost a high architectural form of how they took mud huts and elevated them and gave them status to the point of almost being palaces.
So the Mapungwe Interpretation Center is often described as being inseparable from its landscape. Can you walk our listeners through the moments where site tectonics and program became one?
I started exploring the ancient technology of timbrel vaulting, which was something that was in the North Africa, taken by the Moors into Spain. Gaudi developed it, and then a contractor took it to America and did 1,000 buildings with no steel that still last today.
So the entire philosophy of VOX is how do we make materials which are easy to use, easy to install, and have little to zero maintenance. So even working with not the most professional labor, how do we get a more seamless installation done is something that we designed the products before even starting to produce them.
You've obviously mentored and interacted with the students from all over the world. What is your take on Indian students of architecture or design? So Peter, which is your favorite building material?
I think it's the brick.
Love brick. Mine too.
We call it crumblies. We build with the earth in one way or another. And incredible things have been done over time with it, and they're still done with it. And we try and look at substitutes for it, but it's remarkable. Yeah, when 95% of the world builds without architects, it's quite arrogant to think that you as the architect have all the answers. You need to learn from the people.
Hello, and welcome to episode 4 of Design Dialogues, IIID BRC's podcast on architecture and design, where we explore ideas, people, and practices shaping the way we live, learn, and build. Today's conversation is a special one. We are joined by a master who has spent his life studying the wisdom of place, and an industry partner who's reimagining how materials and products shape contemporary design. Our first guest, Peter Rich, is an award-winning South African architect whose life's work sits at the intersection of anthropology, craft, and tectonics. Is one of the most respected voices in contextual and community-rooted architecture. His work, from the Mapungwe Interpretation Center to his decades of research into African settlements, has shown the world that architecture can be both technically inventive and deeply humane. I first heard about Peter from a fellow architect, Senthil Kumar, while working on a government school project under Code Studio. He came up with this modular classroom concept, experimenting with the timbrel vault construction. Intrigued, we decided to invite him for the IIID Master Series in 2019. And we were blown away by his presentation, especially his sketches. Here's a guy from South Africa showing us India. It was so inspiring, this path that's rooted to cultural context and dives deeply into the vernacular. Also joining us today is Varun Poddar, founder of VOX India, a design-forward brand bringing global product innovation to the Indian market. Varun is known for bridging European sensibilities with Indian realities, raising the bar for quality, modularity, and sustainable building systems. What is really special is, I remember this conversation with Varun where he told me that he had actually taken inputs from architects to tweak his product to the Indian context. So maybe you'll give us a little insight into that a little later, Varun. Together, we are exploring authenticity, material intelligence, the future of making, and what it truly means to design with sensitivity to place and to people. Peter, walk us through your early days as an architect and some defining moments which led you on this path.
I think it started before I became an architect. It started in my first year, 1964. And I went down to what was then Lorenzo Marx, which is now Maputo, and I met Pancho Guedes. He was to become my guru. And he opened my eyes as a young first year to what it meant to be in Africa, what it meant to be rooted in a place. And he introduced me to the idea that my interest in the tribals was something I need to actually go and do something about other than taking pictures. I need to go and live with them. I needed to be in activism, because them living in the tribal state they were in an indigenous way was something that was going to be destroyed subsequently by the iniquities of social engineering and apartheid. So I went on a mission, and from illiterate tribal women I learned the same lessons you could learn going to Rome, because although they were illiterate in terms of language, through the adornment of the body and the practice of rituals, they acquired the same knowledge as Palladio had, of axiality, duality, bilateral symmetry, front and back. And they translated that into their architecture in almost a high architectural form, of how they took mud huts and elevated them and gave them status to the point of almost being palaces, and also how they went around and observed the Victorian Art Deco and 1950 motor cars, and they took that whole global culture and they transformed it into something that was very personal. And what I discovered was why they did that is they were reinventing themselves to create a new artistic language that could re-establish the identity of their language they were losing. Because you lose your language, you lose your culture. You should understand that as Indians.
You've written and spoken about designing with Africa and your long fieldwork documenting vernacular settlements. How did that fieldwork change your way of thinking about material, form, and climate responsive design?
First of all, when I went into tribal cultures, I didn't go as the professor, I didn't go as the architect. Architects can be very arrogant. I went as a simple mortal who's coming to learn from you. And I took a measuring tape and I worked with the grannies and the mothers and the children. And then they invited me into their homes, and I got access that anthropologists wouldn't, just through building the trust and that friendship. And from that, I started to understand the value of what they did in their lives, how they coped with situations, what materials they used. And I had this inside window. And then I documented it accurately, which is what architects do, which is a record. I got into the anthropological record, and I suddenly found this incredible world where there was an ordered life and existence, and all the issues of gender and that we have today, they're all taken care of in that world in a dignified way. There's a place for women, there's a place for men. There's patriarchal societies that are actually run by matriarchs. Okay, so it revealed all of these things and more, and it gave me respect for cultures other than my own, and how to win respect when you go into those cultures other than your own. And cultural diversity and multiculturalism is something you as Indians are aware of, we very, very aware of, and it's actually one of the realities of who we are today.
So, the Mapungwe Interpretation Center is often described as being inseparable from its landscape. Can you walk our listeners through the moments where site tectonics and program became one for that project?
Yes, we entered a competition, and it was given our new dispensation and our democracy. Mapungubwe was important to Africans because before the demise of Africa in 1503, when the Portuguese pulled the carpet on the gold trade at Kilwa, and it's been exploited ever since until recent times. In the 9th and 12th century, there was evidence that a culture actually traded with China, India, the Middle East, technology and other things. So to them, it was an indication that they were valued at a point in time, and therefore highly revered. So I looked for, how do you 6.5 hours from a major center do a building that's 80% less carbon than the normal building. It's not about fashion, it's not about style, and do something that's almost an extension of the biodiversity of the area. It's not about form. And I wanted a cave architecture, and I wanted to explore the qualities of slatted light in that harsh environment. It's on the border of Zimbabwe. It looks across into Zimbabwe and across into Botswana. I started exploring the ancient technology of timber vaulting, which was something that was in North Africa, taken by the Moors into Spain. Gaudi developed it, and then a contractor, Guastavino, took it to America and did 1,000 buildings with no steel that still last today. And so I had to convince the National Parks Board, who are quite conservative, that we needed to embrace this ancient way of building and bring it back to Africa. And to do that, I had to engage with certain academics in America. There was an engineer who started investigating this ancient technology so that we could legitimize it from an indemnity and other point of view. And my scheme was chosen by a group of Africans who had moved into the hierarchy, the Lemba people. They're actually being proven to be the wandering Jews. And they insisted on having this building, other than the other competition industry entries, which were rather Disneyland and patronizing. They said, we want something that is of our people, and it's got substance. So we embarked on an adventure which was just a miracle, and we got goose pimples when we went there to experience what we really were doing, because we were just young and dumb and eager, which is a good naive position to be in. And we just got the impossible done.
Your work often blurs craft, improvisation, and rigorous design logic. How do you balance the poetry of craft with the technical demands of modern construction and client expectation?
Well, we had an even greater challenge, because the funder of that project and my Alexander Heritage Center, which is another story, I'll talk about it later, is that the government funding agent, Department of Environment and Tourism, insisted that a certain percentage of the contract was done by unemployed, unskilled labor that was local, that was taught a skill. So imagine that from a contracting point of view, and it had to be across gender and across age, and it had to be audited. So that was the challenge we had, but we had to also find the right people to, you can't just go to a woman in the middle of the veldt and take her away to work on a building project. What's her husband got? So we had to acquire all sorts of mannered etiquette and ways of dealing with the people's language, in order for them to realize they were given an opportunity to empower themselves and feel good about themselves. So it had that wonderful component to it. And what was wonderful, at the end of the project, everybody thought it was their building because they so loved what they'd contributed. And that's great.
Yeah, I think ownership is a really big component which a lot of us overlook.
Yes.
Getting the community involved is a great way to make sure that, the spaces are used productively.
And we in South Africa, you have to get community involvement, because if you don't, they will demolish your building within 3 months of it being built. There has to actually be that front end, sincere demonstration of empowerment, not at a superficial level. And a lot of government instigated competitions where it was hurried and they avoided that and tried to do it retro, failed. Okay, because the people are insistent that they're involved.
So using local labor, did that in some way also help with local building techniques? Was there some sort of
very often
inroad?
very often it was teaching new skill.
Did you learn any new, because was there an exchange?
Oh yes, there was a complete exchange. And of course you do it under the premise that when your job's complete, they can take that skill and use it further. That's another complicated reality to sustain that. But what we did in Mapungubwe's case is we built the building, we removed the stones from the surface, which we then reused on the roof, and we built the timber vaulting tiles from the soil of the site using 5% cement and we got the local woman to actually make hand pressed tiles, which we then used. So we avoided having to bring tiles fired in an oven, 6.5 hours away with the travel. So it reduced the whole and we tried to also see if we could do it at the weakest strength possible. We were working with MIT and Cambridge in the UK, who had actually studied timbrel vaulting, and they gave the mathematical dimension to it. I've now transferred those skills in India. We don't need that. We can work with Sentinel and other people and tribals, because it was common knowledge. It's just when things are not common knowledge, you have to go another route to prove to the developed world that you're doing something responsibly.
VOX brings European product thinking into India. How do you adapt those products to Indian climates, construction practices, and price sensitivity?
VOX is a 35-year-old company operating in around 50 plus countries around the world. We are selling our products in areas which are sub-zero temperatures to 50 temperatures up to 55 degrees Celsius. So over the last 35 years, what has happened is that there has been so much of incremental innovation that has gone into the product, that today these products are inherently capable of withstanding different climatic conditions. For example, your humidity, sunlight, or your UV resistance, and also the color fading. So it's built into the product itself on how to deal with different climate zones. As far as construction techniques are concerned, so the entire philosophy of VOX is how do we make materials which are easy to use, easy to install, and have little to zero maintenance. So even working with not the most professional labor, how do we get a more seamless installation done is something that we design the products before even starting to produce them. So all these are built into the product that we make over here. And from a cost point of view, VOX products earlier we were importing from Europe, which caused us to be a little expensive. But now that we are manufacturing in India, we are a lot more competitive. We are slightly more expensive than a lot of local products available, or the Chinese products available in the market. But if you see the entire total cost of ownership of a product during its lifespan, and with the zero maintenance that we have, we often become a lot more economical than conventional materials available.
Coming back to your sketches, Peter, are I just wanted to know, like, they're beautiful and they're mesmerizing. Are these the primary tools of design, or is it a starting point for communication?
For me, it's almost like a form of meditation. I embed myself in a situation, and part of embedding myself is I put my embodied energy into that. It's I'm not drawing from a photograph. I'm in the situation where I've got the smell, I've got the noise, I've got the sound, I've got the taste, and I'm responding to that situation in a spontaneous way, just the way a child would respond to something. And I try and capture the essence of what emotionally is actually affecting me by that particular thing. I'm not drawing it to represent it. And a lot of I believe there's a brain in the hand. I've got a thinking hand, and your brain is connected to the autobiography of what's here. And it's a way of connecting that knowledge, also opening the doors to your intuition, none of which are in the library of your computer. So they're different forms of intelligence. So this is a natural intelligence. And then there's intuitive intelligence, and then there's AI intelligence and whatever. But this one goes where those others can't go, because it actually is working in a in an integrated way on everything you've remembered from when you were young. And then also, when you draw it, other than just clicking a photograph, indelibly, when while you're drawing it, you're also analyzing, you're drawing a map, you're drawing a plan, you're drawing a section. So there's an analytical side of it. So it's a level of inquiry that happens at multiple levels, which embeds you in the context of what you're looking at.
Yeah, a lot of times when it's very difficult to describe it, but when you're sketching, you're already visualized so much, and you're just trying to put it on paper. So it's sort of like an emotional response to a physical context.
Yes, and you've also got lateral vision and all of that, which you don't have when you draw from a photograph.
Yeah.
So you're immersed in that situation. So it's a way of sharpening your perception of understanding that situation, because you put yourself in that embedded thing. And it's It's actually amazing. And some of the sketches I do, even on that day, I think, well, this isn't a particularly good sketch. But I look 3 years later, I discover it, and I think, my God, this is marvelous. Who did this sketch? Because it actually is charged with that energy.
How has digital design, BIM, parametrics, digital fabrication, influenced or changed the way you work with traditional materials in craft?
Um, my sons, who are my partners, have insisted that I remain analog. They'll do the digital. So the digital thing is a support. You know, a 3D can be constructed, of which I can then do a sketch plan over. But we do all of our design and our construction freehand, because again, it's that total integrated way that you can pull things together also very quickly. Of the other intelligences you can call upon, and certainly at the production level. But what I do try and do is certain programs like Revit make you, if you not literate with natural intelligence, which is by the hand, they make you think in terms of form before you've done plan and section, which is dangerous, because to be an architect, you need to resolve plan, which has got to do with with relationship of parts, movement, um, site restraints, all sorts of things. And then the section is the 3D, because I believe form is too easy. I believe in Kengo Kuma's adage that he's anti-form. That form is the more ethereal, other is more difficult, and that's what I try and do in my architecture. I don't like and do form per se. In fact, the form is a product of the space that you're creating, which is an interior. Architecture is about space, and the spaces between and the spaces in buildings, and it's about ambience. Okay. And also a lot of 3D work pulls you into a bird's eye position instead of an eye level position. So we were brought up in the 2-point perspective thing. So it locks you back in and locks you back in. And just working with a range of people who have profound computer skills, they're realizing the advantage of having natural intelligence working alongside your other intelligences actually enriches how you can personally contribute your life's experience to something and make it personal.
Absolutely. So, you've taught and lectured extensively. What is a single mindset shift you try to impart to architecture students today that wasn't emphasized when you were starting out?
I think some of them were, look, the most important thing is to be curious, um, be a thinking person, immerse yourself in the situation. Doshi said the clues are all in the situation, and the best philosophy is the one that's in the situation. It's not in the other. So actually understand that it's rooted in your context. And I'm trying to get Indian and other students to realize that if language is your culture, also start looking at the meaning in your language of certain things that you take for granted, like front door and entrance. When you go and ask your granny in Malayalam or one of your languages, you get a much more enriched description of what that thing is. So it takes on a new meaning. So, you know, by all means, one needs to look at a world architecture, but you also need to look at your Indianness, and you need to learn from your past. You know, there's that beautiful quote by Dr. S. Radhakrishnan: a teacher presents the past, reveals the present, and creates the future. And the past isn't just something that, oh, that's old-fashioned stuff. We just won, together with a British practice, a new city, green city in East Africa, in Rwanda, where we actually helped them win the competition by bringing the good manners we learned from the tribals to a new way of dealing with urbanism, because they'd never been urbanized before. So just social spaces, the way you receive a guest, the good manners that exist when you actually go into those tribal structures, we've tried to bring into a new urbanism. And I don't think AI is going to take cognizance of any of that. We've lost a lot in the nuances of placemaking.
Yeah, that's kind of true because we have so much history and culture here. And if
Yeah.
we don't learn to respect that and to integrate it,
Yes.
and if we need to stop ignoring that,
Yes.
and like you said, not get carried away by Western trends,
Yeah.
and look into our own building practices, our way of living,
Yes.
instead of just blindly.
And aspirations change. If you go into tribal cultures like Kuke did back in 93 when he lived with family in dry regions and other regions, he looked at the aspirations. Culture is about your culture, but it's also about your aspirations. He looked at the pre-aspirations of television, and the aspirations changed by television. And we've now got aspirations changed by this. Okay,
Absolutely.
big time. And there's also people pulling back because they say with this we've also lost something, certainly at the level of education. So how do you recreate that balance?
So, architects often demand flexibility on site. How does VOX balance factory controlled precision with on site realities?
At VOX, we use a lot of state of the art machinery to produce these profiles, and they all are controlled to a high degree of precision on what the dimension stability of the product can be churned out from the factory. So, from the factory, we are very tightly controlled on what the product dimensions are. But at the site, we understand that there is small play in the construction. Also, these materials contract and expand, so we have to design it in such a way that it is able to absorb that expansion contraction via the expansion joints or the side trims that we keep. But both of these aspects is controlled largely by the installation that is done on the site. So at Vox, we try and train a lot of installers. We do over 3,000 to 4,000 installers we have trained in the last 1 year itself. And we are doing that as an ongoing practice. But apart from training, we also sometimes at the sites send our own teams to supervise and install and make sure that the installation is done in a right way that allows the materials to do that expansion and contraction.
So, here I wanted to ask you, Varun, because you're working in India. Is there any innovation that you have done, taken an input from the Indian architects, and innovated your product or tweaked your product to kind of perform better here in India?
Most of the innovation that we are doing is because of the architects. So if you look at the meaning of Vox basically means voice, and over here is the voice of the architects. So it's you who gives us the inspirations of designing new products, new profile shapes, colors, patterns on it, but not only the aesthetic looks of it, but also the functionality of it. So for example, one of the innovation that we made in India, and we are very proud to say that, is the jointless system that we made. So earlier the panels used to be connected over the length with a small beading in middle. A lot of architects liked it. A lot of architects did not like it. So we innovated to create a way to join these panels without that beading in the middle. And we are very proud to say that this innovation has been done for the first time in India, even though Vox has been making these panels from the last 35 years in Europe. But they were not able to come up with that solution, and that came from the Indian team. But it was thanks to the architects who led us in that direction. So there have been a lot of different innovation that we have done listening to architects, and it's the most fun part of it, because for us we get clues and direct answers of what you guys are thinking, which leads to the future trends.
What about that thing you did with Smaran?
Oh yes,
Ah,
so
tell
that
that
was another.
story.
So Smaran is also a dear friend. So
Mhm.
we met a couple of months back at one of the events, and he came up with a problem, and he said that one of sometimes when we install the panels right to the edge of the balcony systems, there's a chance of the rainwater percolating down through the panel and going gliding towards the door and falling to the door,
Dripping,
dripping.
basically.
Yes, and then we realized that yes, that's a genuine problem, and then we understood that the reason behind it is that the civil work is not done in the right way, or that pani patti that's not been installed. So we try to integrate that into our own product, and that's another innovation that we have made this year, listening to the architects. So
So, what are you calling that?
it has to
Are
be
you
something
calling
with
it Smaran?
Smaran.
Yeah.
So yeah, so we really enjoy working with architects, and we get a lot of feedback from them on how to improve our products, and that's where the fun really is.
So, Peter, when you work internationally on projects outside of Southern Africa, how do you translate your ideas while avoiding importing an aesthetic? Are there limits to applying site rooted ideas across contexts?
I think what I learned from working with cultures other than your own, I take that same respect forward. I think I did that when I came to India to do the Awards of Excellence. I know one Indian architect said a lot of people that come from an Anglophile background are usually quite arrogant and think they know everything. And I said, look, I don't know your situation. It's very complex. We have a complex situation, but I established that with humility. But a tribal woman once said to me, we see what we want to see and we make it our own. And the important thing about that, I think it's what architects do. I mean, even without working somewhere else, you're so exposed to things in other cultures. But when you do that, it's how you reinterpret what you've seen and invest it with symbolic meaning and change it in its context, both physically and culturally, that can make it unique. We almost don't reinvent anything. It's how we do that. So if I'm working in China and I've been working in India, something like the lotus flower, something that's revered. I come from if the dragon, on the other hand, if you come from a Christian background, something you kill and then it's revered there. So in some cases, you even try and, like in China, you're trying to remind people of the culture they've thrown away and they need to regain. And any context is not about the physical; it's about the cultural. So how do you deal with that in a respectful way? And then how can that actually inform your work? And also in the African context, the thing I'm best known for is that one takes the respect that you've learned from the tradition and the past, but how do you move away from colonialism and the modernist ethic and transform it into a contemporary thing that's relevant and not patronizing?
Yeah.
And that's the challenge, that's what we're trying to teach.
Peter, can you tell us about a project that failed or didn't turn out as expected and what that taught you to improve later in your work? Any lessons from that?
They haven't really been design or architectural failures, but they've been disappointments. Like, you win a world heritage site in the Ngorongoro crater, and it's about to go on site, but the client is the president, and the president changes, so the project stops. I think we're all faced with those realities in our lives, and also a lot of projects that one, like the city project we're hoping for at the moment, just because of politics in East Africa and a more right-wing party coming in Germany, suddenly funding gets held. So you just got to deal with those realities within a practice, okay? But one certainly learns. I think the biggest mistake is I like to attract into my existence the right clients, because you can't do a good job without the right client. And you need to sometimes just say no. I mean, if I get a domestic client who's, I soon observe that they're so busy trying to be like somebody else that they don't know who they are, you're not going to have success with them at any level, at architectural or interior level, because they don't have what it takes to do something worthwhile. So you just got to be perceptive about that and will the right kind of people into your existence.
Yeah. So, with increased interest in low carbon and low tech strategies, which traditional techniques do you think deserve urgent reevaluation and adoption?
I was part of a Zoom call on the launch of a new book by Field and Clegg and Bradley in London the other day, and there were all these top British firms that were Bureau Happold and that were looking at schools in East Africa. And they were looking at this technique and that other technique. And I asked a question of one of the directors afterwards, whatever happened to the brick of Laurie Baker? We're so busy trying to reinvent the wheel that people are suddenly pressing the pause button and saying, well, there's something to learn from that. Why have we dropped it? Okay. And a lot of that reevaluation is actually happening. Okay, I mean, there's someone who gave his life. I think also Laurie Baker needs somebody to do a PhD and rewrite. Laurie Baker's
Book.
not one of these He sort of marketed as the sort of hip guy that got lost in some whole earth catalog somewhere along the way. And actually, he's exceptional at many, many levels. And someone needs to rewrite that book. Okay. I mean, I've got involved with as least some concrete and cement as possible because it contributes to CO2. And it's contextually based. Okay, it's based on context. And then what other local materials can you do? It's quite good about that Serenity Ferme project, because when you work there, you've got to take materials within a certain radius for your core building. It doesn't mean you can't use products that are more sophisticated, but to justify the use of those, your core structure has to be. And then another important thing of sustainability is maintenance. Real maintenance. The problem with a lot of these very arty adventures is within 3 years they fall apart.
So they need to have a life.
Yeah. There's no definitive answer. Each situation demands its own skill, and it takes ingenuity and it takes hard work. But peasant cultures used to just be resourceful about what they had. Not trying to be so influenced by the other. And that takes a degree of discipline to get back to that level of logic.
So locally sourced material is a good start.
Locally sourced materials, yeah. And then you need a more sophisticated material, and you've got the constant, and we have it in, when people want to price a project in East Africa, we say, well, is it Chinese price or German price? German electrics are 4 times the price, but you know that they're good. But maybe there's a middle road of a South Africa product, which is where you come in. Okay, so you need to know your market.
Yeah,
and you know that the low end product, be it from China or wherever, is certainly going to fail within a short time frame, and it's actually not worth it. Yeah, there are top products in China, but they don't market them in the developing countries. They market the cheaper stuff.
Yeah.
In the sale, look, buy this because it's cheaper than that, but it's not cheaper than that.
So Varun, sustainability is front of mind for specifiers. Which material innovations or supply chain changes has VOX implemented recently to reduce embodied carbon and improve circularity?
So at VOX, our products are all dry cladding. So, and it's not a one-time use plastic. So even after the life of the building, after the life of the product, you want to recycle these and make it something else. We can always do that. So you can either send the products back to us, or you can send it to a closest recycling center near you, and you can recycle these products. Apart from that, our plant is completely zero waste. So whatever wastages is produced during the production also is recycled within the plant and reused for the products. Then adding to what Peter just mentioned about locally sourcing. So we started our plant in India 3 years back. So initially we used to get all the chemicals and all the ingredients from Europe. But slowly, with every month, we have started localizing these materials and procuring most of it from India. Some key ingredients still come from Europe, but at least 80 to 90% is locally sourced. So it is more ecological and reducing their
Carbon miles.
carbon prints. And finally, what Peter just said about the maintenance and the life of the product. So we offer a warranty of 20 years currently, but we know that for the next 30 years, 40 years, and 50 years also, these products have absolutely no issues for the building. So that's the way we are working on sustainability.
So another question for you, Varun. Where do you see the biggest opportunity for manufacturers to collaborate with the architects better? Is it early design stage, sample labs, co-developed mock-ups, or anything else?
I think it would be all of them. So design, the earlier we start working with architects and start understanding how you would like the products to be fitted into your projects, that's when we can start working upon the design of the product itself and start creating something unique and customized for you. And so the earlier we collaborate with designers and architects, it's better for us from a manufacturing point of view. And some of the biggest innovation that we have done has come from your suggestions. Also, once the product is designed and on the 3Ds, it's very important to do a physical mock-up also, so that we can see what the practical challenges may or may not occur with these different solutions, and how do we create a better system out of it.
There's a growing appetite for architecture that feels authentic and locally anchored. Do you worry about authenticity becoming a trend and a marketable style rather than a responsible approach? How do you guard against that happening?
Look, there's certainly in the hospitality market in Africa, people who have money, when they travel to those venues, want authenticity. They want natural materials, first of all, that are the opposite to the high embodied energy environments that they come from. They want something that you can feel, you can taste, you can smell.
Real, yeah.
And it's got to be real. Okay? So we bend over backwards to be sincere to that and locally sourced. Okay? And that's just a principle that we have. You know, 2/3 of Europe are built by mud. So mud isn't new. It's just we've, you know, I always use Doshi's analogy that the developed world believes in this false construct of certainty and perfection, and all their paranoias come from it. Their movies talk about it, whereas India has a belief in uncertainty as a reality and the agent of change, and it enables you also to fail. Okay, and it's far more real. So I think that mindset is also interesting to embrace. And when I've brought universities from the developed world, from Finland and from America, to work in Africa, just the change of that mindset has influenced the future lives of those particular students, because they don't just complacently sit down and just accept what's given to them anymore. They question it.
So, wanted to ask you, when you've obviously mentored and interacted with the students from all over the world.
Yeah.
What is your take? Like, are they all more or less the same, or what is your take on Indian students of architecture or design? And do you feel there are certain things we need to step up to, or do we have an advantage, an edge in India? How do they fare when compared to the rest of the world?
Well, at a good school of architecture, they streets ahead. I think you have too many schools.
Yeah.
And some of the schools don't teach architecture at all. They just teach CAD, I suppose. But I'm associated with 6 very good schools, and most of them are new schools, and most of them were brought about through philanthropy. Okay, the Avani School, the Vadia School, the CARE School, the C School, the Seed School. A lot of them are pretty Kerala and Karnataka based. There are other good schools here as well. And schools change. I think Indian students have the advantage. A lot of the good schools, they go out and in their first and second year, they document living cultures, peasant cultures, tribal cultures, and learn about cultural diversity and learn about things that someone in the developed world doesn't learn about, and also learn about making. And I think just all those complex nuances that you have to deal with make you a better thinker. And there also isn't, I find in India, that annoying thing that you think, you just have a bad attitude. There's a good attitude. I mean, when a student says to me, "Sir, can you please give us your eyes that through drawing we can learn to see," and at 6 o'clock on a Sunday morning, you get 160 students coming to sketch. That wouldn't happen elsewhere in the world. And I think also the level of discourse about architecture that happens in India doesn't happen in Copenhagen, London, or New York. It just doesn't happen. So, there are the elite institutions that people actually go to. But I think at an undergraduate level, at a good school, both in our country and your country, you streets ahead. And I've got a student who interned with me from the Vadia school in Mysore. She's just gone to America and got 100% for every subject.
Wow.
So you mustn't take for granted. You come from a culture that's, I mean, just that lecture I gave to you when I was last here, that sketching lecture, the number of people who are literary orientated that just come out of, there's a whole nother nuance of intelligence that exists. And I think it comes from your DNA, it comes from who Indians are. And I'm trying to get Indians to understand who they are. You know, they need to read that book, The Seven Rivers, and they need to read The Ocean of Change. And Indians need to start realizing that India's made huge contributions to the betterment of humankind over time. So forget about the British making you feel you hadn't contributed anything. That was their problem, not your problem. But don't make it your problem. You the future, and Africa's the future.
So it's the ancient civilizations that rise again, hopefully. So the next question was, what attracts you to India and, brings you back again and again? But I think you've just answered that.
I had an Italian architect who was Sicilian, and his wife said, my husband likes to work in Sicily, India, Latin America, and Africa because there's confusione, and in the confusione he can work between the cracks. It's a little bit like when you drive here, you go for the gap.
Yes, you go for the gap.
So there's that, but there's also your social tolerance comes from when you drive in India. There's no point in having road rage, so you learn social tolerance. But then there's the food, there's the color, there's the smells, there's the chaos, there's a diversity, there's this richness, and then there's the language that all comes on top of it. The output of that is who you are.
Yeah, I think we can make do in any situation.
Yeah, and it's just totally. And then you have these various strategies of wealth and other things, so there's this multi-layer that exists, which just make it so rich. Which is why you've got. We're busy looking for architects for this project in Tamil Nadu, international architects, but we're looking at the developed world because we're looking where you've got labor intensive, also where your rate of exchange is such relative to the dollar that it's not that you can afford labor.
No.
So you can craft things by hand differently. So those are the people we need.
Sign me up. Yeah. Looking ahead 10 to 15 years, what kind of built work do you most hope to be doing? And what kind of briefs would you love more clients to bring to you?
I'm hoping, it's taken a long time, but suddenly tribal chiefs who kicked off land that are now national parks and are reclaiming their rights, not for land, but for development, and are waking up to the fact that they need to re-engage with who they are in terms of their proud past, are coming to me to create new town centers, to actually claim their rights on the Northern Kruger Park, their development rights, and to try and reinvent in a contemporary way what it means to be in terms of symbolically, in terms of their tribe, okay, or their ethnicity. So I'm hoping to be part of that because I've got the background, anthropological background, and the respect for that. And it mustn't be patronizing in any way. It's got to do with how you organize space, how you socialize, and those particular placemaking in Africa nuances, okay, which I'm hoping to put into action at a city scale and at a rural scale. And it's got to do with, a house is not a home. I coined the word that in an African sense, a house is not a home unless it's a village. It has to do with a sense of belonging. It has to do with not just repeating a bad version of American suburbia with a regional shopping center, because you can't create an urbanity from that. And that's what the real estate people dish up. But how do you rethink that so that you can do something that's meaningful and organic and can grow?
Yeah, those are absolutely without any identity. Like every city in America will have that strip mall and it'll have that suburban homes. And there's like you don't get a sense of place. You could be in any city in America, So
Africans have a sense of defensible space, which is where there's boundaries to you and the outer world. It's done for security and other reasons, but you also have a You have a sense of collective belonging. You in India have your integrated families. You have
Yes.
that, and you developed your own. There's a lot of commonality. But Charles Correa was right. The answer, and Doshi was right. The answers are in the village.
Yeah.
The village has got social interaction, social spaces, collective spaces. Those spaces are different today. We're talking about it at Sanctity Ferme. If you're going to actually bring people to actually an hour and a half from Bangalore, go there on the weekend to engage with nature, where are the social spaces?
Yeah.
Where do you watch cricket? Where do the
Play.
youth gather?
Where do you walk? Where do you run?
Where do you engage
Where
with
do the old people go?
where do you do other things, and what things do you do collectively in a post-COVID situation? How do you question all of that, and how do you create? Don't go and repeat suburbia. How do you create something that's different to that? So we've got to question all of that. So I'm pleased to be part of that. Those are the challenges. And how do you create a new urbanity for people who've never been urbanized? You're different. You've had 8,000 years start. Okay, but certain Africans have never lived in anything other than a single story building in a courtyard, and they suddenly got to live on a 4-story building on a slope. How do you make that a nice experience? We've lost the alleyways. We've lost the small space. We all go to Europe and we all get excited about the tightness of medieval towns. But when it comes to urban planning, there's all this residual American space that adds up to nothing.
Yeah, like
and we think it's great, and it's not great.
Even in Jaipur and all, those streets with the jharokas and the balconies, they're so beautiful to walk through, and they're always shaded and cool because of the height of the building and those narrow streets. And there's so much happening, and it's so easy to engage with the street.
Yeah.
And you get a sense of belonging because of that. Yeah, so I have one last question for you, Varun. As VOX scales in India, what are your top 3 capabilities that you want to focus on? For example, is it technical support, logistics, customization, which you already spoke about, digital specs, BIM libraries?
One is definitely going to be the installation network, and how do we train people more to do clean work at the site. The second would be how do we customize our products, listen to more feedback, and create products which go. Some products go into the low cost housing, but also we create products for the more expensive villas and hotels. So how do we do that? And third will be definitely distribution. How do we penetrate more cities and geographies, and even within the city that we are present in, how do we get a bigger share of the market?
I think volumes are, if you develop and focus, of course, luxury sector is a big thing, but even homes for the common man, like, and I'm talking about, the middle class segment, there are a lot of aspirations there. So if you can come up with a product which is budget friendly and also streamlined to their requirements, I think that'll be a winner for sure.
So India, if you see the country, there's a market for the lowest cost product also, and there's a market for the highest Rolls Royce also. And where the fun really lies is that if you can be in the bulk of the pyramid, and how do you create products for that big part of the pyramid?
Yeah, so I think we're done with all our questions. We have a rapid fire. So, Peter, which is your favorite building material?
I think it's the brick.
Love brick. Mine too.
Yeah. We build with, we call it crumblies. We build with the earth in one way or another. And incredible things have been done over time with it, and they're still done with it. And we try and look at substitutes for it, but it's remarkable. Yeah.
Varun?
Engineered polymers.
Well, spoken like a proper inner circle partner. So you mentioned a couple of books during our conversation. So one book that really influenced you?
There was a book, The Idea of Space in Greek Architecture by Rex Martinson from the 1930s, one of the seminal books. He's a South African.
Okay.
Is amazing. and any of Johanni Palasma's writings. Okay, The Eye of the Skin, they're all about phenomenology, basically. The Thinking Hand, The Architecture of Neuroscience, and the book on encounters. They wake you up to your basic fundamental experiential nuances as a human being.
Yours, Varun?
I wish I had a memory like Peter's. It's like he's reading through pages of his mind. There's a book called Modern Design of Everyday Things. I'm forgetting the author's name, but that's been a nice book. Yes.
Donald Norman.
Donald Norman, yes.
Okay, good. Biggest design pet peeve. What makes you wince on sight? Wince, shudder.
What makes me shudder is the lack of perspective some people had on what it means to be oneself. Okay, I spoke about people who are so busy as a result of this and other social media trying to be like somebody else. I think you have it in the interior industry, especially because people, instead of realizing they have an autobiography, they want something they've seen in a magazine that has nothing to do with who they are.
Yeah.
So that makes me shudder.
Fair enough. Yeah, so a non-architectural influence like music or
It's all holistically part of it, and also I think when I look at context, I try and immerse myself in the ordinary, the coincidental, and the spiritual of a community or a client or a place, which is not what one would expect you normally to look for. But there are lots of lessons to learn. And also, I think, when 95% of the world builds without architects, it's quite arrogant to think that you as the architect have all the answers. You need to learn from the people, like you need to learn your market from the people. Yeah.
True. So one design trend you'd like to disappear. You wish it would disappear.
It's just to bring not so much a trend, just to bring principles back into the grounding of what we do. Okay, schools of architecture are starting to do that because principles being thrown out of the window. The author of the book *Sapiens* says at the moment it's who carries the cards. It's not about principle, at political level and all other level. We need to get back to core principle, whether it's family, whether it's religion, whether it's politics or whatever. So I believe we should bring core principle because out of the principles will come all the right answers.
Which is your favorite place?
Favorite place? I think it would be Udaipur. It's also Rome. I really like these two cities a lot.
Were you born in Udaipur?
No, I
Is
wasn't
that your
born in Udaipur.
hometown or
I was
something?
born in Patna, Bihar.
Oh, okay.
But I really like going to Udaipur because of the natural beauty of this place. I think the place is blessed with the hills and the lakes. And the climate also, especially in the winter season. So I really and the culture, the colors, what you spoke about earlier. So it's a beautiful place to be.
Your dream date?
Dream date. It's a woman. Wait, I don't know. Julia Roberts or Susan Sarandon. I don't know. Dream
Nice. Yeah, just the person. We don't want to know what happens next.
Yeah. Or a Mexican.
Okay. Yeah. So thank you, Peter, for joining us today, and Varun. It was amazing talking to both of you and getting your insights. Comment, subscribe, like the podcast, give us your feedback. And if you're not a member, you're really missing out on something. So become a member today. Thank you.
Thank you.